Simplest form is a concept that a lot of my students have struggled with this year, so I thought I'd do a video to help explain. So simplest form is related to equivalent fractions in that equivalent fractions represent the same amount. So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. But when I explain equivalent fractions, I start out with the fraction tiles, and I show them several different equivalent fractions. So 2/4, 6/12, 1/2, if that works, and 3/6. I mean, there are several. So then I explained that simplest form is basically finding the equivalent fraction that ends up with the biggest piece. So how can we use the fewest fraction tiles? So I start having the kids trade, and I usually start off with something a little more difficult, like 2/3. So 2/3, can they trade anything so that this has fewer than 2 pieces? Can they get bigger pieces in here that are going to equal 1/3? So we do 1/2, it's a bigger piece, but it doesn't fit. 1 is too big. 4ths don't equal exactly. You have to add another one, and then that's not equal because there's too much. But other fractions, such as 5/10, are equal to 1/2. Or a fraction like 2/6, you can trade that for a bigger piece. That's 1/3. So simplest form is turning fractions into their smallest possible numerator and denominator while keeping the same amount. So we start off with the fraction tiles, and then we move to pencil and paper, or the algorithms. So if we start out with 4/10, to put that in simplest form, or to check if it's already in simplest form, we use something called the GCF, or the greatest common factor. So we start off by listing all the factors of the numerator and the denominator. So factors are what we multiply to get a product. So if 4 is the product, I can multiply 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. So those are the factors of 4. Then I list the factors of 10. I always start with 1 and 10. Since 10 is an even number, I know 2 is going to go evenly, and I know 2 times 5 is 10. And that's all. And knowing the math facts is super important for being able to list those factors. The second step is to find the biggest. Find the biggest factor that both the numerator and the denominator share. So 2 is the biggest number that both the numerator and the denominator share. That's the biggest factor, the greatest common factor. And then the third step is to divide the numerator and the denominator by the GCF. So in the equivalent fractions video, I explained that when you divide a fraction by a fraction that has the same numerator and denominator, that fraction is really equal to 1. So we're changing the numbers, but the amount represented is not changed. So if we divide 4 by 2, we get 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 2/5 is the simplest form of 4/10. Let's do another one. Let's do 7/10. So if I start, I'll be listing the factors. 7 can be multiplied by 7 times 1, and 7 is actually prime. So that's a great way to know that a number will only have 2 factors. And then 10, I can multiply 10 and 1, 5 and 2. Then I find the biggest factor they both share, which in this case, that happens to be 1. And then I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by 1 over 1. So I'm still left with 7/10. So 7/10 is actually already in simplest form. And some students don't have to go through the whole process. They can kind of tell when a fraction is already in simplest form, but I still want to have them go through the process the first couple of days so that they can get the hang of it and have a better sense of when a fraction is already in simplest form.